we're really privileged to have with us Colum Conway, who's the Chief Executive of Social Work England, and also our Chair, Lord Patel of Bradford. So they're going to be sharing what we've learned in our first year as a specialist regulator for social work. We went live in December 2019, and what a year to start in. So they'll be reflecting on 2020, and also in particular our Social Work in England 2020 First Reflections report, which was published earlier this year and is available on our website. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Kamlesh, who I believe is starting us off.
Thank you very much, Moini. What a strange way to welcome a load of people. But I'm glad we're all together in a virtual way, at least. Just thinking back this morning when I first began my social work career way back in the early 80s in inner city Bradford, I'm not sure how I would have managed if I had to learn, develop and work in the midst of a pandemic. What a year it's been. So I suppose first and foremost, we take our hats off to each and every one of you who's been on the front line. We knew the sector's response was crucial because those supported by social workers were likely to be some of the people most at risk in society. Not just from catching the virus, but coping with the massive day-to-day changes in services, support and social contact. So you've been helping some of the most vulnerable people in our society during what must be one of the most challenging times in history. So a really big thank you. And thank you also for your engagement and support. Social Work England has set about establishing a new regulator at probably one of the most difficult times imaginable. Today, Colum and I, we're doing a bit of a double act. I'll share, and so we'll hear some personal reflections on what we've learned from all of you so far, which we recently published in our First Reflections report that Moini mentioned. And I hope some of you have had the opportunity to read it, and Colum's going to say a little bit more about that. It's probably fair to say that from the moment I took up my post way back in mid-2018, my vision was to ensure that the core of everything that we did at Social Work England, there'd be three key elements: engagement, co-production and collaboration with everyone with an interest in social work. I suppose that this year's really challenged that in a real way, in a much quicker way than I'd anticipated prior to the pandemic. I believe that Social Work England has stood up reasonably well and that we've built some strong foundations. But most importantly, we've established some really good working relationships with key stakeholders that have been around us. People within the system who collectively are able to respond to what the profession needs, and most importantly, what those with lived experience need from the profession. The pandemic highlighted that the profession is quite dispersed with many employers and different working arrangements. This has certainly posed a challenge for us as a new organisation when the profession looked for leadership at the start of the pandemic, and rightly looked for guidance, for support and for direction. And I suppose the challenge for us was about how we could do some of that while being clear that what we can and what we can't do as a regulator. And understandably, there was a level of frustration for the profession and for us about all that. The pandemic has challenged us all to work in a more collaborative and coherent way to try and provide what I would call a systems type leadership for a profession which is complex and dispersed, both in policy terms and in practice terms. The pandemic provided an opportunity to accelerate our engagement with some of the key players in our system, those who have experience of social work. And just thinking about them this morning, there's a lot of them. Of course, there's the social workers, there's the people with lived experience, there's our two sponsor government departments, the Department of Health and Social Care and the Department of Education. They're the chief social workers, there's ADSS, ADCS, the 80+ education institutions that we're working with, the fast track programs, the local government association, the local authorities, CAFCAS, one of the biggest providers, the profit and non-profit sectors, the Principal Social Workers Network, the Practice Leaders Network, the research community, which is very, broad, community care, which has played a big part in our progression, BASWA, of course, SKY, Skills for Care, the unions, and of course, the wide range of arm's length bodies and regulators that we work with. And all of these are underpinned by all the local and regional groups. So there's a lot of people. I suppose as a discussion and as a result of engaging with all these people, we set up a number of things. We set up an emergency temporary register. We talked to education and training providers about being flexible and responsive. We engage with students to understand their situation. We know that sustaining placements for students was a particular challenge. We recognise that a blanket regulatory approach to ongoing courses and placements was not appropriate. We encourage providers to develop local solutions for maintaining courses and placements using their relationship with placement providers, but most importantly in conversation with students. I know that when I was a student, that the 2 practice placements that I was at were life-changing and they were an important part of my development. So I do appreciate that students have had an extremely worrying year, and I commend their determination to complete their courses and start practicing. To retain the flexibility providers needed to adapt their courses, we delayed the introduction of our new education and training standards by a whole academic year to September 2021. We adapted our inspection of education providers, conducting them almost uniquely online. This has presented its challenges, but on the plus side, I suppose we've been able to speak with more students who are either studying or working online than ever before. One of the early decisions we made with my vision about engagement collaboration was to ensure that we not only had a headquarters based in Sheffield, but that we had a regional presence, as I felt that was an important way to engage, collaborate, and to reach out to professionals, students, and people with lived experience of social work across the country. I'm sure many of you have engaged with one of our fantastic regional engagement team members. As they've spoken, I believe so far to over 22,000 people, either in person or online. In order to supplement the voice of others, we launched 2 of the advisory forums. We launched the National Advisory Forum, a collective of 15 individuals with a multitude of lived and learned experience of social work, which Social Work England can call upon to help ensure that our work is co-produced. Many actually were involved in developing this wonderful initiative, Social Work Week. As you know, we oversee about 83 education providers in England, and to support this, we launched the Education and Training Advisory Forum in January 2020. Again, a group made up of key stakeholders from across the social work education landscape who provide expert advice and challenge and support and input into the strategic development of our work on education and training, and they've continued to meet regularly despite the lockdown. Of course, while we were responding to these and many more challenges, we've also had to continue to establish our own organisation, and sometimes that's easy to forget. As Mawini said, it's important to remember that we only officially became the regulator on the 2nd of December 2019. Our staff were just beginning to settle down into that new working environment, getting used to the new communication IT systems, building relationship with new colleagues, and we were still employing new people to join the team. But within months, we had to adapt to home working. We had to make all our new communications and IT systems work in a very different way. We've had to recruit an additional 50 staff remotely, so they've not even met their colleagues in person yet. Of course, as an organisation, we've recognised how difficult this has been for our staff, and have done everything possible to focus on their well-being. If you don't have a suitable place of work, a garden for the kids to go out in, or you have to homeschool by responding to work emails and calls, or deal with fitness to practice cases remotely, life can become very difficult. I'm sure you're all in a similar situation and understand the pressures that this can bring. So look, to end with, in good old social work fashion, we've reflected on all these experiences and more, some of which Colum will touch upon now. And it's impacted on our planning and our thinking about the future. I, for one, believe we do need urgently to focus on what appears to be an unnecessary, complicated and a complex picture for education and training and the ongoing post-qualifying landscape. I hope we can all work together to bring greater clarity to this, and I look forward to working with you. I've probably said enough now, so I'm going to pass on to Colum to talk about learnings from our first year report and the important issues of things like registration, fitness to practice and continual professional development. Thank you again.
Thank you, Kamlesh, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning for an hour just to help us reflect on what has happened in the last most remarkable year that we all hope none of us will ever have to repeat again. And just to say, you know, at the very start, a big thank you and congratulations to our team who have put on this event for the week. It's remarkable to be sitting here in my son's bedroom while he's away at university, talking to a large group of people down a screen. It's a different environment, and of course I live in Northern Ireland, so I've been in Ireland effectively for the last year, working with all my colleagues across all of England. So it's been a remarkable and fascinating personal experience for us all in so many different ways, and we all have different kind of family and community experiences that we've had to take to our both professional and personal lives. So that's been a huge challenge. So again, I just want to reiterate what Kamlesh said at the start. You know, a huge congratulations to and thank you to all of the social workers across the country who have responded remarkably well in all sorts of challenging and innovative ways to be able to respond to people, and we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of years. But certainly congratulations to the team in Social Work England as well for putting this week together. While this is a challenge, working through the screens, it does present some opportunities as well. Well, let's put it this way, we would never have done a week if this was a physical event. So this kind of virtual event offers different opportunities. And also we could never have engaged with so many people. I mean, you would never get upwards of 15,000 15,000 kind of places on this event across the week. I mean, that would never have happened if we had a physical space. So that presents good opportunities. But also, of course, with all these events, we terribly miss the ability to interact, even in this, that the best you can do is type a question into a screen. But I would really, encourage you to type a question. This is the opportunity, and we're very keen to be as responsive as we can, and at least get that type of engagement going, which would be really lovely for 20 minutes or so at the end of the session. I think the other thing where this is useful is certainly some of the events yesterday and some of the events I've been at previously. When we're at physical events, you can see people when you're looking down trying to do their emails through their phones while they're present in the session. Whereas I think that's easier now, because I know I put stuff on, put it on the background, and then get on with other things and kind of hear it. So I'm sure you're doing that this morning too, and I hope you pick up some interesting stuff. So what's it been like this year at Social Work England? We're nothing like what we had planned it, for sure. As Kamlesh has said, we've had to move everything online from the 23rd of March and really go from there, and that'll be a year in a couple of weeks. So how has that been? Well, what does a regulator need to do? We were very conscious of the fact that the social work profession, this will be your third regulator in the last 6 years, and you know, we totally understand that regulation is not at the forefront of everybody's mind. It's important to us. We work in it every day, but for professions and for social work in particular, how you regulate it is not at the forefront of your mind. But nonetheless, the history of regulation for the social work profession has not been brilliant. It would be fair to say. So what we wanted to do from Word Go is to really put some energy and effort into really engaging with the whole profession and those who have experience of the profession in a way that people could respond and feel a little bit energized and a little bit engaged, and build a platform for the first year that we could all work from. And that was key. And of course, crucial to any regulator is registration. To hold a register of social workers to ensure that the title is protected, and only those who are qualified social workers are on that register, and it's a public facing register for everyone to see. So that was the first thing, and we were really pleased that at the end of the year, come November, that the renewals process, which was the first time that kind of you as a social worker or any social worker in the country had to actually step forward and engage with Social Work England en masse, was through the renewals process. So we required everybody to open a Social Work England account and register, and then renew. And we pushed very hard on that, and we were anxious about that. It needed to work very well for us, and thankfully it did. And the vast majority of people who wanted to register on with Social Work England have successfully registered. Generally, the feedback to us has been positive, and that people find the online experience a relatively good experience. And not everybody is comfortable online, and not everybody had a great experience, but the vast majority did. And I hope that we've been able to be responsive to people in the way that they would have expected. We have lessons to learn, of course. We understand that the road to quality is always under construction, so it will never be a finished process. It will always be something that we will want to improve, and we'll continue to work on it and improve it. And we are working on a lessons learned process now that will mean for registration next year that will be an improved process. And of course, we continue to develop our systems to make that a good experience. One of the things that we asked people to do last year was to evidence CPD. Now, this was a big change and a big move and a new direction for social work. We believe a really important one. I think fundamental to any regulation process is the ability to evidence ongoing competency and ongoing professional development. It's about professionalism, and as Kamlesh said, one of the things that were important to him early on was co-production engagement. For me, one of the important things was how we build a system and engage with the profession in a way that we can encourage professionalism and encourage the desire for people to want to evidence how they are developing. And goodness knows there are lots of people. We are a reflective profession, and we wanted to capture that and understand that, and again build on it over time. One of the important things about this first year of Social Work England is it's our first year, and there is a whole opportunity now over a number of years to really shape the strategic direction for the profession, and we want to be part of that process. So for the first year, we simply asked for some form of evidence of CPD, and we got a really good response, which we again were very pleased about. I mean, virtually everybody in the whole profession uploaded some form of CPD, which was really amazing, and we were really pleased about, and it gives us again a strong opportunity to commit to some of the numbers. So overall, from a profession of just short of 100,000 social workers, we received 220,000 valid CPD records. That's an average of about over two pieces per social worker, which is really good. And to be fair, to be fair, there's a broad range of extraordinarily excellent CPD and some that I think we could, encourage people to develop. And so we're now currently looking at that, and there's assessment work going on, and there will be a report later in the year. But I think for the social work profession, that was a huge achievement in the middle of a pandemic. And I think we should all as a profession be rightly proud. And that gives us a real opportunity to build further now and to look at CPD as the core of what we do. As Kamala said, one of the challenges for the year has been just how we've had to engage in the broader kind of social work system and all of those who are involved in it, and look at ways in which we can collaborate and help coordinate responses for people. And there are some big policy areas that are very important to us that we've been working on this year and will continue to work on now into the future. And they're very important for the development of the social work profession. So, for example, the reform of the Mental Health Act and key developments in mental capacity and liberty protection safeguarding is an area that we're putting a lot of energy into now and have got involved with in the last year, and particularly working around standards for adult mental health capacity professionals and in education and training for them, and also reviewing the standards for adult mental health professionals. So there's some really important policy work there, and you'll see that coming out this year in terms of consultations and developments in that area. Also, we're very pleased to see the announcement of the independent review of children's social care, and we will again be working alongside that development in terms of how services can be reviewed in development over the period of time. And as part of that, we're really keen to look at the whole kind of education and training developmental arena for the social work profession. Kamlesh has already referenced the work that we're doing in education and training. So from this September, we will be launching our reapproval process for all of the providers of education and training. And currently we're working on developing learning outcomes from our standards that will help develop that reapproval process. So that gives us an opportunity to really work with our colleagues in the whole kind of education and training sector, and then beyond that into the profession and what needs to happen in post-qualifying. And we've had a great engagement and opportunity to talk to a number of important people in and around the post-qualifying area for social work and what that might look like. And I think, in fairness, there is a general agreement that we need to simplify this area, and that we need to make it more coherent and closer to the social work professional experience. And we're keen to do that as one part of the process, as one part of the system. We will work together with others and with the broad social work profession and those who have experience of social work to ensure that over time we can look at the post-qualifying landscape and put in a position, a framework that people can clearly track through their professional development. And we think that's an important for us, and it's been good in this first year just to reflect on it and think about it. It's one of the huge advantages now, I would say, to have a specialist social work regulator, so that we can focus entirely our attention on the social work profession and what needs to happen there, and how we can support and develop the profession in the work that it does. And some of the other areas that had a particular impact on the organisation this year, and indeed for everyone, but as an organisation, we try to respond to was the area of equality, diversity, and inclusion, and of course the whole kind of what happened last year through the Black Lives Matter movement, and how racial injustice and meaningful equality came to the fore, and how we needed to really consider and think deeply about the principles that support anti-racist and anti-oppressive practice. And we believe, like many social workers, that social work is a uniquely placed profession to lead the way in this area, both in the education and training of social workers and in practice. So within Social Work England, we launched our first statement of intent around equality, diversity and inclusion, and it is a central part of the development of the organisation over the next number of years, and it will certainly be a central part of how we engage with the profession in developing and challenging the profession itself, but also the society and the structures within society, and in terms of how we can challenge in really important ways and underpin the principles of anti-racist and anti-oppressive practice in social work. I think that's a big challenge for us all, and it's certainly something that we will want to facilitate and collaborate with others as well. And also, we have to set an example in our own context and within our own organisation, and we will certainly work to do that. One of the other key things about regulation is, of course, fitness to practice. And as people will know, when we went live in December 2019, we took on a significant fitness to practice caseload from HCPC, and we are continuing to work on that caseload. It has been a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge, and that's certainly something, you know, that we have learned this year in terms of how we can apply the processes that we have around fitness to practice against the cases that have come into us, and we have worked extremely hard to try and make that happen. But some of those cases are older cases; they have complexity, and you know, we know that every case is an individual social worker. Every case is a person who has complained, who has concerns, and it's really important that all of those cases are dealt with properly, and that the individuals are responded to properly and in the right way. And also this year, we have a significant number of new referrals month on month. The cases, the complaints to Social Work England, the new complaints have been higher than they have been over the previous years. We're not quite sure why that is yet. There's bound to be all sorts of reasons for that. The fact that we're in this pandemic environment has got to be one of them. We're looking at some of the themes, and you know, we'll try and get underneath it. But we are working well through those processes. You know, for the new cases that we have received since December 19, you know, over a third of investigations are completed within 6 months. You know, 3/4 within 7 months, and almost 90% within 8 months. So we've worked really hard through this year to try and address the concerns that come to us as quickly and as appropriately as possible, and we'll continue to do that. And you know, obviously we want to move through the cases that come to us quickly as well. So that's an important area, and one that we're continuing to learn a lot and to develop, bearing in mind that this, you know, we have new legislation, new processes, and new opportunities to do things differently in fitness to practice. But of course, we also have a very new team and people who are learning as they go, which would have always been the circumstances. And as Kamlesh referred to, and John Dillon, our executive director of fitness to practice, would say at this stage he now has, you know, 40 people in his team who he has never met physically, and he's met on screen. So those are challenges, but you know, I think they're the challenges that we're all encountering. And we were delighted to have the research done and to put forward our first reflections for 2020 in the report that was referred to earlier. We're very pleased with that development, but it is our first reflections, and we have to acknowledge it's our first year, and so there's only a limited amount that we can say about social work at this time. But one of the things is that this is it's a trilogy. So this is the first report of 3. The second report we're working on now will come out next year. And in the third report, we hope will be a much broader kind of state of the nation, people refer to, sort of report in terms of what is social work, what does it look like, what are the key components, and what are the brilliant successes and the challenges, and what which we as a system need to respond to. But one of the interesting things from the report this year, which I think is really important, just to reflect back on the social work profession, so that about a quarter, about 24% of social workers reported that they believed social work as a profession was valued by other people. Now that compares with like 98% of doctors and 90% of nurses. So it's a very low number within the profession that the profession believes that they're valued by others. But interestingly, when you ask others, when you ask the public, in the report, almost 90% of people recognize that social work is valuable and that it is helping vulnerable people. I think that's really important, that we are able to help. One of our key aims as Social Work England is to promote confidence in the social work profession with the public. But I believe also it's about promoting confidence within the social work profession with social workers, and a pride and confidence in the profession and what it does in all its guises and all aspects of what this profession delivers. And I think that's something we've learned this year that is important, that we will need to take forward and engage again with the system in order to encourage that. And also we have to recognise that the report also says that 85% of social workers say they experience stress in their job. It is a stressful job. There is no doubt about that. We as social workers work in some of the most difficult circumstances with some of the most difficult and vulnerable people in difficult and vulnerable families and difficult and vulnerable communities. That is the reality. That we go to those places, and therefore it is inevitably stressful. And there are great successes and there is much to celebrate, but there is also much challenge, and we have to acknowledge the context within which social work takes place, and how in some way we can impact on that. Now, that's not something we can do directly ourselves, we understand that, but we have also learnt this year that it is something we need to be aware of, and we need to ensure that we are able to respond and able to work with others in a collaborative way, that we can do that. So there were my kind of few reflections. There are things that are coming in down the chat line. One of these challenges in doing this is this multitasking of talking and watching people on screen and also looking at the text that's coming down. So I'm not sure, Marwina, do you want me to particularly answer any of those questions now, or do you want me to hold off and wait for you to come in on them? I'll be led by yourselves.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we can go to, or if you just put yourself on mute, Colum, there you go, then the echo will go. We've learned that, so yeah, if we're on mute while we're answering, unless we're speaking, that's really helpful. So yeah, we've got a few that have come through. That was really helpful. Thank you, Colum and Kamlesh, a really amazing overview, very thorough and clear, so thank you. And we have got some great questions coming through. I'm just going to go straight to them so we've got plenty of time. Kamlesh, or Lord Patel, as you're rightly addressed in this question, Michael asks, based on your experience as a social worker, what one piece of advice would you give to any aspiring newly qualified social worker?
Michael, I'm not sure you should be asking me, but no, seriously, thank you for that question, Michael. Look, when I qualified, I was lucky because my first year in social work was as what they used to call a generic social worker. So my caseloads, I was able to work with child protection, I was able to work with mental health, learning disabilities, families, a whole variety of things. And I had the opportunity of seeing where my passion really lay. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about my placements, they influenced what my passion was about. I ended up working with drug users because that's what I wanted to be. But what advice would you give? You've said you're aspiring AYSW. So depends what you aspire to, Michael. If you want to be a manager, then there's a particular path, but you may, leadership in social work is not just about management. Leadership in social work is about, being an expert in the area of practice you want to work in, because that's what's so important. That's what's so important for people. So I think there's a decision for you. My first year, I was a sponge. I was open. I was honest. I asked loads and loads of questions, and I learned. And I think I would say to you, pick everybody's brains and learn. The one advice I learned after I set up a drug rehabilitation unit was, as human beings and probably as social workers, we all like to be liked, and I like to be liked. So I did things I hope that made people like me. That was wrong. So the one piece of advice is be absolutely honest and speak your mind. If it's a tough message you have to give somebody, as long as it's the right message, I think that's the way to go. And the people you work with will be grateful for that honesty and transparency at the end of the day, even if they don't like you on the day when you say it. But good luck in your career, and I'm sure you'll do really well, Michael. Cheers.
Thanks, Kamlesh. Colum, I'm wondering about coming to you next on. There's a couple of questions around our fitness to practice process. So just whether we feel we're doing it in an adequate time frame, if we're supporting social workers' mental health through the process, and just a query around the kind of the legal teams that are involved in the process, and whether that's the way we're planning to continue. I hope that's clear enough. I can come back if that's helpful.
Okay, yeah, I can certainly pick up the first two. I'm not sure if the third one, but certainly are we dealing with the fitness to practice cases in an adequate time frame? One of the key points about the legislation that we have established in Social Work England is that we could be more flexible and be able to be more responsive to fitness to practice cases, and therefore deal with them in a better time frame. So are we able to, at this point, are we happy that we're able to deal with the cases that we've received from HCPC in an adequate time frame? At the minute, I think the answer would have to be no. But we are working on it. So we inherited quite an old caseload. That's not in any way to address any issue with HCPC, but they were working on a different legislation. So it's taken us time to move that across their older caseloads, and they're more difficult to deal with. And in the pandemic hasn't helped. I'm not using that as an excuse, but it certainly hasn't helped in that people aren't able to access the office, aren't able to get access to information that would help us move these cases forward. We've reshaped our team a little bit to try and address that, and we are very confident that we can move those cases forward. In terms of the cases that come into this week or this year, since we've went live, yes, I think we have, as I said earlier, nearly 90% of the cases that have come to us since December 19 have been moved forward within an 8-month period. So we'll continue to work on that, and we'll continue to see it as a central and important part of what we do. Key to the time frame, of course, is that everything is done in the right way, and the people are responded to adequately, and that everything is done appropriately, and that people are the proper process and good outcomes happen. So the balance between good outcomes and time is really, really important. So we'll continue to work on that. In terms of the second question on mental health, obviously this is very difficult for any social worker to encounter, as it is for people to raise complaints. So we have in place ways in which we can respond to social workers, and also to signpost them to other areas. But again, this is something we're very keen to learn on, and to get feedback from social workers at every stage in terms of how we're doing that, and how it was appropriate. I mean, the key for the fitness to practice process is that we do have professional social worker in the decision making at every single stage, so they will be aware of the issues in relation to social work, and hopefully we can be as responsive as we can be to the social worker going through that experience, but very keen to learn and develop our processes from this first year. And also, I suppose, just to say, good outcomes and timeliness is key, and that will help more mental health more than anything else. So that's the area where we'll focus on. I don't know if is anything further on the third one in terms of the legal teams.
Yeah, thanks, Colum. I think that's really helpful. I'll just wait for, I think so there's a question about kind of that a legal practice had been appointed, and there was a lot of legalistic language and not social work language, and I can understand that's really jarring, and my limited kind of understanding of the fitness to practice process is that is part of it. And there's a couple of other questions coming up, and I'm just wondering whether, just to get some of the other questions in, to point people to the fitness to practice workshop that's happening later this week, and there's still space available on that as far as I'm aware, and that will be with our executive director of fitness to practice. So if you want to dive into the details of that, I really recommend you go along to that session. I don't want to miss Anne's question that came in quite early. Let me just scan up to it and make sure I've got it here. So how are you promoting the development of practice leadership and career pathways for people who want to pursue a career pathway of expert practice rather than management? I don't know which one of you wants to tackle that first, Kamlesh, or do you want me to pass back to Colum?
I can kick off, and then Colum can do the difficult bits. Do I wait for the... Hi, Anne. Really important question, Anne. If you listen to my response to Michael, it was about leadership in either, whether it's management or expert practice. And I think as a regulator, I'm really concerned about expert practice, because that's what the public want. That's what the public's confidence will be about, people who are expert in that practice. And I think when I was talking about the post-qualifying landscape and where we're heading, that's what we want a big focus on. How can you become an expert in what you're doing? What's the career pathway? Which, skilled systems can we bring together? So I think it's a really important one. It's important for us as a regulator to build confidence in the public. The development of practice is crucial, beginning with the Cpd process to becoming experts in what you want to do, and annotate that on our register. So I think as the years pass by, we want to work with people like yourself to really develop that. I mean, that's the sort of broad view, and maybe Colum wants to add to that.
Yes, important to come off mute before you start in. Yeah, so I mean, like Kamlesh has said, I think, and I alluded to it in my few words, the post-qualifying landscape and the framework for post-qualifying is really important, and it needs to be developed, and it is not in as good a place as it could be. And there are lots of very strong elements to it, but there are elements that need to be gathered together and present a more coherent and straightforward process for the profession. And I think most people would agree with that. And I absolutely agree that a key element of it has to be about developing expertise and practice. There has to be a pathway that isn't just into management. There has to be a pathway that sustains people in practice and gives the opportunity for people to deepen their practice and to be linked to career. Now, that's a huge challenge, because the career development is around employers and other key components, and how they recognise the developmental role within social work. But I think there's a challenge there for us, and I would certainly, the essence of the question is, do we support that? And the answer is yes, we absolutely do. And I think we're very keen, as again, to collaborate with others to take that challenge on and embed fundamentally practice and expertise within the profession, for sure.
I'm now struggling to unmute as well, so between us we'll get there. Catherine, I wondered if you're there, and if I know there's been quite a few questions about CPD, and I just wondered if there was anything outstanding that Colum and Kamlesh could speak to, particularly I guess around new framework, etc.
Yes, there is. It's really tricky trying to keep it on top of answering all the really interesting questions. And I don't know if Moena said it, but we will pick up these questions and provide a response if we haven't been able to answer them directly or in the Q&A responses. So yes, there was one quite interesting one about CPD frameworks. I'm just going to try and find it. There's so many, which is absolutely great. I think I might have even put it in. Oh yeah, what could the CPD framework that's been mentioned look like? So I think that's a question that does come up quite often, certainly when we're on our rounds. And yeah, just is there a response to that, a Kamlesh or Colum? I'll have a look at the.
Come to you, Colum.
Okay, yeah, I'll pick that up. So we're very much at the beginning point of CPD. I mean, what we've learned in this year is that there is a broad breadth of what has been submitted as CPD, and I noticed someone in the chat talked about kind of our approach been relatively generalist, and for this first year, the key was just simply to ensure compliance, if you like. So that people submitted some form of CPD. We specifically weren't very prescriptive around that, and I understand that some people were a bit disappointed in that and would have liked us to be a bit more specific and to present a framework that was clearer. I think we want to use the learning from this year and into the years ahead to be able to develop that framework with people, and I think that's the key, that we don't land a framework on top of people and on top of social workers that somehow doesn't relate to their experience, both in terms of their specific work and the broad kind of underpinning principles of social work that should take place regardless of where that work is. So I think that's the key. We want to work with you. So later, we're currently looking at the CPD that we get in. Later in the year, we'll be looking at a consultation process in terms of what we're thinking about around CPD for next year and the years ahead. I don't think we'll do a huge amount of amendment or adjustment specifically for this year coming up, but I do think we're looking to develop a much more robust framework into the future, and certainly the year after that. So that gives people time to adjust and the system time to adjust. So it's hard for me to say right now what that framework would look like, but it has to be aligned to what people are doing in their work. So whether the generic underpinning principles that inform social work and how people reflect on that, how people reflect within the supervision environment, and then to reflect on the specific work in children's, in adult mental health, in older people's, in whatever way and whatever frame social work is working in. And of course, key to this as well is, the existing documents that we have, like the PCF, like the skills statements from our chief social workers, and other guidance that is there. We'll need to build in to be as part of that framework, but be assured that we will consult with the profession and others at each step, and we will be doing that this year as well. So there'll be an opportunity for people to feed back in their experience from last year and what they'd like to see happen into the future.
Thanks, Colum. Catherine's right, they're coming in thick and fast now. Again, I'm going to go back to one that was mentioned earlier, and it was in response to your point on the report. One of the reflections was that there's a delta between social workers' self-assessment of the profession's value versus the public's. And I also think that's a really important point of reflection of the differing views of self and others. I just wondered if you want to say a bit more about that, either of you. Happy to come to either of you. Give me a wave. Fighting it between them. Cool. Should we come to you, Kamlesh, first?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, it's not a narrow margin, is it? When only a quarter of social workers believe the public value their work, and actually, you know, refreshingly, and I think it has changed over this last few years, that it's over 80% who believe that the profession is valuable. I think probably the pandemic has had something to do with that. They recognise, you know, how difficult and complex a job this is. It's almost easier in a hospital. A doctor and a nurse has a specific task, and people say, you know, ours is a very complex role. I think the other issue, which probably alludes to one of the other questions about, you know, the role of social workers in the middle of the pandemic. Look, you know, we don't have a Royal College of Social Work like the BMA or the GMC or Royal College of Nursing, who goes out there and lobbies government, promotes the profession, you know, joins things up, provides that leadership. As I said when I was speaking, you know, we have a massive different little groups that, you know, do their best in their own environments, but there isn't one body. Now, you know, unfortunately, it's not the job of a regulator to take that place, but, you know, but we will, you know, our job is to sort of have promote confidence in the public about the profession, and I think we'll do some of that through all the standards and improving practice, but through our State of the Nation reports. You know, it's holding a mirror up. Nobody tells us we can't hold a mirror up to the profession, to the public, to government ministers about what's right and wrong. It's holding a mirror up, but it's not the same as a Royal College that's there fighting your corner, believing in it. You know, I think having a professional specific regulator is important. I think it does put you on a different level. I think people recognise, you know, you're an important profession. You're regulated, you know, and you're developing all the time. So, but it must be difficult, I suppose, if, you know, if you're one of the 75% who are doing a self-assessment and you don't believe the public value you, it must be difficult to, you know, to do that self-assessment as well. Colum, I don't know, you may wish to add something to that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a question we have to ask, and I'd be interested, even the person who asked the question, what their view of it is. I mean, because I think there is a challenge here for us. If morale to a certain extent, or the feeling of value, is undermined in the profession in this way, and it doesn't relate to how people feel about that, and I think there's lots of reasons for it. There's no one particular reason. Someone earlier on, I saw a question about, you know, representing and showing leadership for social workers in the pandemic in the same way that doctors and nurses have, and Camlish alluded to that. I think there is a challenge for us all. We certainly have our part to play in that. But it's one part among many, and I think the crucial thing now for us, and I think we would like to certainly present as a national organisation for social work, the opportunity to work with others and collaborate in a way that is able to get clearer messages out there, or are able to help and support people to present messages about social work, and part of that is this week, for example. You know, part of what we're trying to do is to do something like this week, aligned to World Social Work Day, that just is a contribution to the overall kind of cadence that we can start to develop around the social work profession. We all believe strongly in it. There's so many positive stories about what has happened, but it works across many areas, and I think that's part of our challenge. And certainly what we've learned in the last year, reflection on our year, is that is a challenge. How do we collectively pull everyone together in a way that helps present social work in a really positive light, not just to people but to the profession itself, and for the profession to be proud of what we do. And I think there's something about how we develop the concept of professionalism and really present good practice in a way that's vibrant. So that's going to take a little bit of time, but we're certainly want to be part of that journey. But it is an interesting reflection, and I think something we all need to reflect on and think about what we're doing. And I suppose just to say that today, this week is part of us trying to step out into that journey.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Colum. And I think there were a few reflections in there about the kind of differing roles in social care and how they get, maybe misnamed or misunderstood. And that speaks to that point as well, doesn't it? Of really understanding this profession as a regulated profession and and marking it in that way, and people understanding what social work is and its impact. So thank you, and what a great way to end this session, which I am going to have to do, I'm afraid, just because of time. There are still so many questions coming in, and can I suggest that you join, if you're able to, our panel session at 4 o'clock today, where Colum and Camlish will be back on screen here to answer your questions again. Some of those have been submitted in advance, so we do have a few planned, some that are already coming up in this chat as well. So another opportunity just to hear from the regulator and also other leaders in social work to think about the future of this profession. That's really wanted to shift that focus into the future of social work. So please do join us on that. There'll be tickets available up to an hour before. So do come along to that if you can. So I'm going to close the session there and just say thanks ever so much to Colum and Camlish for their insight and contributions, to Catherine for managing a frantic Q&A, and to everybody for participating and throwing yourselves into it. Thank you so much. Remember that you can log this as your CPD if you're a social worker, your reflections on this session. Do log that in your online account, and also we'll ask that you do complete our post event survey, which Catherine will post in the Q&A as well, so that we can get some feedback about this and all events at Social Work Week. Really hope to see you at some future sessions throughout the week, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.